Hello and welcome to Unit 6, and we are on Lesson 7. So let's go ahead and jump right in and look at our objectives here. What are we doing? We will make 2 studio projects, an abstract painting, which is already done, and a mixed media project, which is what we're working on now. How are we doing this? By painting, photographing, and inserting images into PowerPoint. And why are we doing this? To show our understanding of modern times in art. Okay, so we are on this Studio 6-10 mixed media project. So today's goal, we have three things we need to kind of address. One, we have more decisions to make today. We're going to plan out our composition a little bit, and then you can actually start assembling or constructing this mixed media project. So there's some things we need to think about before we get there, and part of this is that decision-making step. At this point, you have decided whether you are going to do a collage or a sculpture. So now you have to look at that and decide, are you going to do a collage that is abstract, like the one here on the beginning? Or are you going to do a collage that is non-representational, like the one here, the third picture in? So when we talk about abstract, there's representation of realistic things. So we can see real items in this. And then non-representational, there's no reality there. We can't pick out, pinpoint, there is no subject necessarily. It's just really utilizing the art elements and principles of design to create an interesting, beautiful piece of artwork. Same can be said about the sculpture side. So if you decided you're going to do a sculpture and you want that sculpture to be abstract, this is a great example of an abstract sculpture. Or do you want your sculpture to be non-representational? Okay, so I think I can better explain this a little bit in the next slide. So abstract, again, is the simplification of things. There is still subject matter, though. So when we are doing the collage, you might use photographs. You might arrange objects to create an image of a subject matter. So maybe you have found a bunch of magazine pictures of flowers with lots of green background or green stems and green leaves, okay? And you want to take those photographs of flowers and you're going to turn them into a tree, like an evergreen tree. And you're going to cut them out and use them to create the evergreen tree. So the pine tree or the evergreen tree is the subject matter, and you're using other collage materials to create that new subject matter. That's still abstract, okay? With the sculpture here, Arthur Bardollo, he is a really great artist, and he takes found objects and he assembles them in a way that creates something new, but it has a recognizable subject. So this is an example of a fox, and if you look closely there, you can see a car in there, but there's many other pieces and parts to vehicles and plastic and recyclable materials that he uses, and then he goes back and he paints over top of them to give you that sense of that animal. Okay, so look up his work, it's really cool. But that's an example of a sculpture that is made out of found objects and still has a recognizable subject matter. Pretty cool. That's abstract. Non-representational, there is no subject matter. So if we're looking at the collage example, no photographs in this example, at least none that are recognizable. You could use a photograph and crop it in really tight and get just a portion of it and print that, and that would be fine. So cropping photos and cutting them so they're not recognizable anymore, but still utilizing them is perfectly fine for the collage if you want to go with that non-representational direction. And then the sculpture there is another good example of non-representational art. There is no recognizable subject matter. It's just an interesting arrangement of art elements and principles to create a beautiful piece of artwork. That's the most important thing when you think about non-representational, is you're using those art elements. So when we talk about art elements, we better understand them a little bit. So our basic definition is they are the building blocks of art. Line, shape, form, texture, space, value, and color are the 7 elements. And then you can see here that we're going to be focusing a little bit on line, shape, and color for this project, whether you're doing collage or sculpture. Remember that a line is a path that a point has followed. and that a shape is a two-dimensional object, and that colors are the reflection of light off of an object. Okay, so you can kind of focus your attention on those as you construct your project. Then the principles of art take those elements further and make them, you can create a really great piece of artwork with the art elements, but it becomes better as you become more educated and understand the concepts and the principles of design and principles of art, like contrast, emphasis, unity, movement, variety, pattern, proportion, and balance. Those are the principles. They essentially are the rules that help artists use those art elements. So I'm going to create unity through color, through that element. Or I'm going to create repetition, or, oh, I don't see repetition on there. Repetition is typically a listing of a principle, but patterning is the same, can be very interchangeable slightly. So patterning is going to be a repeated sense of elements, line, shape, or color in an organized fashion. So those are things to consider. So you're using the elements, but the principles kind of guide you and tell you what to do with them. So for this project, unity is super important. And we are going to be focusing, whether you're doing collage or you're doing sculpture, we want it to have a united feel. Anytime you do assemblage work or collage work, it can become very disjointed, very messy, very quickly. So we want to make sure that no matter what we're doing, we are always creating something that all parts, everything that we put into it, has a purpose. And the purpose is to work with the piece that's next to it. We want everything to look like it belongs. And as long as you keep that in the back of your head, that does this look like it fits? Does this belong? Does this have unity? You'll be in good shape with your project. And then balance is also really good to keep in mind too. It's the arrangement of all parts of an artwork to create a sense of equality. We don't want one side of it to be heavier than the other. So we want it to kind of be even on both sides. Not the same, but even. Okay, so after you have established whether you're going to do abstract or non-representational, it's really time to start planning out that composition. So I encourage you to experiment, lay things out, reorganize them, relay them out, re-put them together in different ways until you find something that you really like visually to look at. Remember, we wanted to have unity and balance. And then some other things you might consider are movement, emphasis, and contrast. So movement is going to be a way of using the art elements that causes the viewer's eye to travel over the artwork. So you can see in this top example over here, our eye tends to follow those blocks as they start to fall over. And then emphasis is a way of combining art elements to create one or more centers of interest, a focal point, something that stands out. So you can see that in the second example there, we have 6 circles and only one of them is completely filled in. Well, that draws our attention to that piece. So you might think about in your collage or in your sculpture, is there something that you want to draw attention to? And then you could create some emphasis by using those art elements, okay? Contrast is the effect of showing a difference. So unity often is creating something the same, whereas contrast is going with something that's different. So you can see in that bottom example with all the circles, then all of a sudden we have this blue square. That blue square really draws attention. It has contrast and it takes away unity in the piece. Is it bad? No, not necessarily at all, but it's just what is the goal? Okay, our goal is to have unity in our pieces, and being aware of emphasis and contrast and movement, those can also play a role in how strong our unity is. Okay. Then continuing in this line of planning the composition, some things I want you to remember when you're thinking about your collage. Don't be afraid to overlap lines, overlap objects, shapes, colors. If you overlap things and then when you're painting, you kind of help flow them into one another, excuse me, that can really help to unite the painting portion with the collage portion. So overlapping paint on top of collage work or collage work on top of paint can blend them and pull them together. So that's important. Use simplified shapes and expressive brush work. Don't be afraid to cut or tear your paper because the tearing can give it a really unique feel as well. And then color palette should be unnatural. Don't think that it has to be a realistic color palette or beyond that as far as art history goes. So think unnatural and non-traditional. And then also think about continuing to use the colors throughout. So if you do paint, you want to use that color throughout the whole painting. That's going to help unite things for your collage. Use papers, magazines, and if you can find things that are similar in color. For example, I pulled up a lot of images here. Like I have this dog that's howling and the dog is like whites and blacks. I have a black and white picture of a moon. I have a moon with stars and a tree, which I'm not sure about yet. And I have this cat, and they all have these whites, blacks, and gray tones to them. I also pulled in some tissue paper, so I've got some blue here that I might use in some way on my project. And then I have some other things, but don't be afraid to pull pictures that have some common color already in them. Digitally manipulate photos before printing. This is something I wanted to go over. So I'm going to pull in a new tab, okay, over here, and I'm going to click on Pixlr E. Now this is pixlr.com E /E/. Okay, and I have it in the presentation. It is such a great photo editor and it's super simple to use. So once I get in here, all I'm going to do is hit open image. And I've already saved this example. I really like all of these blues and pinks and things. And I said about all my grays and blacks. So I need a punch of color in some way. So I thought I would maybe use this. Now I can come in and my collage is going to be an abstract collage because there's identifiable images. So just be aware of that. But I can come in here and I can add a filter. I really like the Vignette Filter. It adds a little bit of this white, this black at the corners. And you can see the difference there. Okay, so I'm going to apply that as a filter. There's all kinds of filters. We can put a bevel on this and you can adjust, cancel. And there's all kinds of different things here you can do. You can do an inner glow. Those are kind of nice. I want more of a feathered edge and way more opacity and bring it in. And so that's kind of a neat effect on my painting or picture. I can also do adjustments and I can say like hue and saturation. I can say colorize this and I'm going to make it blues or greens. Okay. So that colorize forces it all to be one color, which is kind of cool. You can adjust the saturation and the lightness to get different effects in this as well. Okay. So don't be afraid to manipulate your photos. Once you're done, you can go to File and you can go Print right there. And it will allow you to bring up a print dialog box that you can print all of those changes that you just made. You can also go File, Save, or File, Export. I like Export, and Quick Export as a PNG seems to work pretty well. Just choose a location where you want this photo to go. I'm going to put it in my pictures, my saved pictures, and I'd give it a file name. Moon at Night, which is kind of silly, but save. Okay, so now I have that file that I could then manipulate it further if I needed to. So pixlr.com /E/ is the version I like. You can go to more simple versions if you just go to pixlr.com. Pixlr X is quick and easy, doesn't have as many features, and this is a new Photo Mash Studio. It's for creating promotional materials. So I haven't played around with that too much, but it is also there. Pixlr E is probably where I've spent the most of my time. Okay, so I wanted to mention that as a possibility for some digital manipulation for print before you print your images to really change them that they'll work better for your project. Texture, don't forget about it. You can paint texture or do texture rubbings. That's awesome. So if you take a piece of paper, and I didn't grab out a crayon, but let's see here. All of my crayons have paper on them right now. But you can take your crayon, peel the paper off the side of it, and put your project on top of something. So I've got a wooden frame here, and I can take my crayon and run it over the edge. And if it was the edge of the crayon, it would be better than the tip, but I can get that wood texture coming through. And now I can use this texture rubbing as part of my collage. And it might be kind of cool to incorporate that. Okay, so if you don't have access to your own textured papers, printed papers, you can also print some, but you can also make your own, which is kind of cool. So cement makes really great textures. Trees make nice textures. All kinds of things. Okay, so whatever has a texture, you can do a texture rubbing. So that's something to consider. And then remember to repeat some of these elements throughout. You don't want to just have texture rubbing up here and then not see it again anywhere else. Okay, that would not be unity. So we want to repeat them throughout the composition to create that sense of unity. If you're thinking more along the lines of creating a sculpture for your project, one of the things you want to remember is the color palette, again, can be an unnatural color, but consider using one color like Louise Nevelson, where she painted everything all one color, and that really pulled it together and had unity. And then the lighting that was done gave it those darks and lights and shadows, and was really kind of cool. So consider one color. The other way you can unify your sculpture is if you have a bunch of different types of objects, different materials, consider wrapping them in something like wrapping paper. And if you wrap them and they're all the same wrapping paper, that can really unify the piece. So you have all these random stuff, unify it by wrapping them in one way. And then also consider making some kind of base. For my sculpture, when I was thinking I was going to do a sculpture, I found this goldfish box, and I found a bunch of stuff. So I have a lot of toilet paper tubes and chunks of wood. Okay, so they're all in my box here, so that if I wanted to start building in my box, I would. Consider painting your base first. So if you are going to use a box, consider painting that. You can really go through the sculpture in two ways. You can take all of the objects you're going to construct it with, paint them all so they're all one color, and then assemble it. I probably would recommend that, unless you're going to use spray paint to paint it, which you would then need an adult's permission and help to do. But if you assemble your box and then you try to go back in and paint it, it's going to be tedious, and I would struggle with that. So I would paint my stuff first and then assemble it. The problem is you don't know exactly what you're going to use, and you might have to paint extra stuff for it. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So I also wanted to go over a few of the construction techniques that were mentioned in our OLS. And so you can see here, you can create paper forms. So instead of using a paper towel tube, you can take card paper or cardstock, and you can roll it, and you can create your own tubes. You can also fold these. You just want to kind of have a tab on the end or an overlap in some way, so that you can then glue it together, glue the seam together. I really like this idea of creating a flange for securing your project. So using a paper towel tube, taking a pair of scissors and literally cutting in and creating these little tabs that then will just fold out, or you could even fold them in if you didn't want to see them on the outside, or you could do every other. Okay, because they're going to get really thick if they all go inside. And that way you have less showing on the outside. So I really like that technique if that's something that you want to try to, and then you can have those little tabs to help you glue with. You can also join paper by just using tape. Put one piece of paper next to another piece of paper, and tape it in place. That would work too. Or you can do the tabs and then tape the tabs down. So that's an option. Cutting notches and then notching things together is also a way of constructing with cardboard and papers. Okay, so those are just some things you might consider and think about if you choose to do the sculpture side of this project. So at this point, you have a decision to make. Is it going to be abstract or non-representational? Start planning your composition and start constructing your mixed media project. So I'm going to pull up my camera here. And one of the first things that I need to do to prepare here is I need to look at my papers and I need to start to trim out and cut what I don't want. Now notice the text that's on here. I'm going to have to figure out, I don't like the text over the cat, but I'm going to have to figure out what am I going to do about that because it's there. I can't get rid of that. So I'm going to start to cut out some of my materials. I'm also going to think about, my plan for tomorrow is going to be to paint my background. So today I'm kind of got my materials and I've decided it's going to be representation, or yeah, it's going to be abstract and it's going to have a subject here. And this is a tail that gets cut off, but I'm not cutting off the tail. Okay. And I'm going to have to figure out what to do with that text. So I'm going to just take time today to cut out and prepare some of my materials. Am I going to have to make changes to them? Am I going to have to trim them? Am I going to have to cut things off? Probably. I mean, this is my first attempt at this. And so here is my background paper. And so maybe I'll put my cat somewhere down here. And I need my dog. And as I do this, I'm going to start laying this out where I think it would be. I don't like the background, so I know that I'm going to go in and paint this background in some way. Unfortunately, my cat and my dog end up on the same side of the paper. Okay, so I may just do something. I kind of want him on this side. And then maybe I'll do something over there. I don't know. Or let me put this behind. Look at that. That might work there. And then I'll have something painted in the background here, like my sky. I love the yellow of the cat's eyes, so I might try to incorporate yellow in some way. And this one is one of the moon pictures that I have, but I have several. So I might start cutting these out. So you can see how I'm starting to cut. I'm starting to overlap, layer. I have some unity in color. Ooh, I have to get rid of that orange out of my dog's mouth. Okay. So maybe that. Still have this other moon that I like too. And this is just, you know, I just started looking at pictures in a magazine and I found the dog and it just kind of went from there. Did I have this idea when I started like 3 hours ago? No. Okay, as I started to find things. So maybe I'll put that there. Maybe I'll cut it out in a circle. Maybe I'll cut part of it out in a circle. I don't know, but that gives me a start. The other thing I have is this blue tissue paper, and I was considering tearing chunks of this and like doing an overlay over top of things when I go to glue it down. And I'm liking the way that looks, and I'm using it in a way where I am repeating it. So it's not like out of place entirely. and I'll overlap. So something, I don't know if I like that piece, but I'll keep it there. So I have some kind of composition coming together. So that's your goal today, is to start to arrange and start to think about this. I'm going to paint. So I'm going to start painting probably tomorrow. And that may help me kind of figure out what to do with some of these other areas that I have in the collage. So I hope that was helpful in getting you set up. If you are going in more of the direction of a sculpture, it is really the same process. It's start to organize and arrange things and start to think about composition and unity with this mixture of materials that you are using. So up on the screen there is a Padlet link. You can submit progress photos there if you need help or want to share out what you are doing today for your project. It would be great to share that there on the Padlet. Otherwise, if you are in need of help, you can also email me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I hope this was helpful today. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Good luck with Unit 6, Lesson number 7.